we are the perfection already. We have the unconditional love. We just don't know it. You don't need to have an NDE to change because of other people having had such an experience, because you learn from that. The source communicates very subtle. And when we are on our phone and going to the grocery stores and being in our car and do all kinds of stuff all the time, we don't allow that subtle communication to come in. Now, there are other people that are just common people, just like you and me, who have had a distressing NDE. So you cannot say that good people will always have good ones and bad people have bad ones. So there must be another reason for that. And we think it is, well, some of us researchers do think it is because...
This is Beyond with Heather Tesh, where we examine near-death experiences and life itself, hopefully making this life a little better. Hello, everybody. Welcome to my show. Today, my guest is Robert Christophor Coppes. Hello, Bob.
Hello. Nice to be on your show. Thank you for having me.
It is wonderful to have you. It really was a pleasure to meet you at the IANDS conference, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. It really was nice to meet you, and I'm so glad to have you on today to talk more about some of the things that you've discovered about near-death experiences.
It was a wonderful conference, wasn't it? It was in Phoenix, and we actually did meet each other there and so many other people with and without NDEs.
Yes. And I've never had a near-death experience. I think you and I are both just people that are really fascinated by them. Yeah. Now, I think that NDEs are a really beautiful way just to learn more about who we really are. And I think that might be the same for you. And that's why you've been studying them and researching them. And it's nice because you can kind of give us a nice overview. I think most of my audience is pretty familiar with them, but if you could just take a moment real quick to go over some of the common characteristics of near-death experiences.
Okay. Well, they are life changers and they are overwhelming for the person who has them. Typically, people get out of their body and they go to this unearthly environment. And every story is different. That's something that is interesting, but it's difficult for researchers like myself then to research them, because also the definition is something that is going to be difficult then. And the interesting thing also is that NDEs, in my opinion, don't only occur in a medical critical situation like a cardiac arrest or an accident, but they can also occur in other situations, like what we hear often is people who are in mental distress, in a psychological downturn, a real tough downturn, or sometimes with meditation or deep prayer, and occasionally also spontaneously. And those are, it's amazing that that happens, but I know a few cases. So that's about, and the thing that I also once researched or compared religions with NDEs, that was interesting too. But it's been a wonderful road to research everything. And it's difficult to research for people like me, because all stories are different. And people find it difficult to express what they have gone through, because the words in our language are inadequate to really tell the whole story.
Well, let's talk about some of those differences, because that really is confusing for a lot of people, because the accounts vary so much. You know, some say there's judgment or a hell, and I would say that's the smaller group, but many of them say there's no judgment. Some people see a religious figure, some people don't.
Yeah.
Some people say there's reincarnation, others don't. How do you account for the differences that people do have?
Well, it's a very good question, and we don't have an answer for that because, every story is different. And as you say, some people do believe that they have seen previous lives. Other people say, I can't relate to that. Interestingly, from some research that was being done, it shows that the percentage of people with an NDE that believe in reincarnation is still the same as in the overall population. So having had an NDE doesn't change your belief into believing that there is reincarnation. That's one thing. And you say correctly, there are people that see religious figures. Typically, people wouldn't see a religious figure from an other religion than they were brought up in. So Christian-oriented people would see Jesus. Uh, um, Hindus would see Krishna, and so there are religious people being seen in NDEs, and that's a thing that's also very interesting. Why that is, but so many have been seen. Also from Islam, people have been seen, or Buddhism, Judaism, anything. Yeah, it varies.
Is that the majority of them, or the smaller group that sees some sort of a religious figure?
I would say it's a minority. Not everyone sees religious figures, but if people do, they really start believing in that part of, or in that particular religion. And the other thing that you mentioned is distressing NDEs. That's really a subset of the NDEs that we know. It's difficult to put a number on that. Numbers that have been put on that is like between 10 and 15%. And of that number, there is only a minority that's really hellish. But they do occur. And it's important to know why that is. And, even though we don't know so much about them because we couldn't really research them very well, there's one thing that we do know, and that is that you cannot say that bad people, and then I want to do the quote unquote because it's difficult to define who is bad, but bad people uh, don't always, or it isn't that bad people have distressing NDEs and good people have good ones. And I say it's difficult to define who is good and bad because that's something that we do here in our capacity as human beings. And because what I learned from NDEers is that on the other side, the words good and bad fall away. They don't have a meaning there. But like there are people on Earth, and there are examples like Damien Brinkley, that's a very famous one. He has been going around um, during his job for an American organization, government organization, to kill off adversaries in other countries. And he did it very often. And he even blew up a whole hotel with more than 50 people in it just to get at one. He had his NDE, and he discovered that in his NDE, during his life review, he saw all his kills, and that was a difficult thing to do. But in his NDE, everything else was blissful. He was not met with anger. He was approached with unconditional love. Now, there are other people that are just common people, just like you and me, who have had a distressing NDE. So you cannot say that good people will always have good ones and bad people have bad ones. So there must be another reason for that. And we think it is, well, some of us researchers do think it is because during the first phase of an NDE, maybe some items pop up in your mind or whatever it is that are from the collective conscious or that come from your own background. Like we have some cases where people were very Catholic oriented with hell and purgatory, and they were so afraid of that that they sort of materialized those, or they were very afraid of rape and AIDS, and those things popped up in their NDE. So those stories are there.
It is really interesting, and certainly there are many atheists that have not had some of the negative near-death experiences, but one thing I have found that's common in many of the people that have had hellish ones is they often say that they had an arrogance. And I think Daniel Brinkley would say that, and his was more he felt it all in his life review. But some of the ones I've heard, I always thought that was interesting, that it wasn't really based on their faith, although some think it was. It was really more based on a type of arrogance.
Yeah, it doesn't. It comes from several directions. There is a good person. I would like to show that book from
Yes.
Kathy McDaniel. She is. This is Misfit in Hell to Have an Expat. She wrote her story in this book, and she says she was really very Roman Catholic, and she was afraid of hell and purgatory, and that's where one of the reasons why it popped up. And I know several others that have similar backgrounds in Roman Catholicism. I was brought up Roman Catholic as well, but so yeah, you're right. Some people have the feeling that it comes from another origin, why they have it. She and others have said it came from their upbringing in that religion.
What's really interesting, though, too, is when we hear about people that have had these negative experiences, they often end up turning into very beautiful experiences.
Yes. Yeah, most of them do change into a happy one, into a blissful one. And there is also a wonderful book, Blessing in Disguise. And in it, there are many cases, and it shows that also people who've had a distressing NDE change their life for the better. They feel themselves that they had to change their way of living. Same with people who have a blissful NDE. They also have the feeling that they have to change their way. You see, that's another typical thing. People who've had a near-death experience do change. It's a life changer. That's what I started off with. They know that purchasing or going after money and power is not something that is important. They feel what is more important is being together with other people, being more helpful to other people, supporting other people, supporting nature, being in nature, doing art. So more the soft sides of our life, and they are not so much in it for getting a good profit and going after a lot of power.
That is so true about how lives are transformed. And it's my opinion that even people listening to these near death experiences or reading about them, I think when we continue to be exposed to them, it also changes who we are for the better.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's if I can tell that for myself, I think I changed also in the course of the decades that I've been looking into NDEs. And I think I was thinking about that lately. And I think the main reason is that from life reviews, you get to understand that you can feel what you've done to other people as if you are that other party. So that is something for those moments you are the other side, you are the receiver, as Daniel Brinkley said it. It's you become the receiver. If you realize that, you think maybe twice in doing things to others. You contemplate better maybe, or you stop. You think about that, about what you do. It is kind of a second thought you have every time you do something, and you maybe think, will I be very happy with this, with my actions? So I think I changed like that. And my hope is that many more people will do that as well. If they go in, understand that NDEs are real, then they will look into what is the messages, like that's unconditional love, and that we are one, that if I do something to you, I actually do it to myself. And I hope that people will change, the general public will change. I hope so.
I think they are, and I think they will continue as more and more people hear about these stories. Something, though, that is troublesome for a lot of people is many near-death experiencers come back and say that we plan our lives. And then I hear people say, I would never plan this lives. So do we have soul plans or original instructions, or, were we up there planning what we're going to do when we get here to Earth?
That's a good question too. I actually, I don't know the answer, but what I see is that there are stories out there, and I'll give you one where it seems to be the case, where people, before they come here, are able to decide what they want to do. Like, I can give you the example about Betty Guadagno. She is also part of the IANDS organization. Um, she had her NDE, and during her she had a drug addiction. She had a horrible life, very difficult. And because of an overdose, she had her NDE. And during her NDE, she saw that she actually chose this life. And she pictured it in a very special way. And I thought that was wonderful how she did it, because she said it was like I was in a grocery store pushing a cart, and I could see in the shelves what kind of events I could choose from. And I thought, wow, incest, that's interesting. Let me do that. Oh, and prostitution, get that too. And drug addiction, and trying to con everyone out their money. Oh, that sounds interesting to me. And she get all those things together, and there is her life. That's a very difficult life she led. And due to her NDE, she came out of everything, and now she can look back on her life and see and change. It's transformed her. That's what I said. It's a life changer.
I've had Betty on as a guest,
Yes.
and I'll have a link to that in the description because her story is absolutely fascinating.
Amazing.
Plus she's just so fun to listen to,
She
really.
is very eloquent in words, and she has this New York accent, and I love that.
Yeah, she's great. She's great. So another question then is, if we plan our lives, there still obviously is an element of free will, because otherwise what would be the point of a life review?
Yeah. Yeah, so the point is, what I understand as well, doing my research is like looking at all these NDEs, or as many as possible. And what I did is to get the quotes that really tell something or give an impression of what an NDE is. And planning your life in advance, or the what I understand is, um, we have a will, a free will, so we can choose. And that is also apparent from one of the NDEs that I came across. That was an elderly lady in the Netherlands just after the war. We were a war-torn country with nothing in it. We had too little food, and everything that was scarce. And she had a girlfriend in school. She was like below 10 of age, and the girlfriend had lice in her hair. At that time, you didn't have shampoos or anything to get rid of those. You had to do that manually. So the school friend asked her to do that, and then the NDEer made this big fuss out of it, so exposing the friend for having lice. Now, later on in her life, the NDEer had her NDE, and then she sees her life review. She sees that particular moment, and she sees that it hurt the friend, and she is the friend for that moment. And it's horrible for her. But she said, the most horrible thing that I realized was not that I hurt her so much, or that I hurt myself through her so much. It was that I saw that I had choices. There were other ways I could have chosen to do stuff, to do it differently. And if I had chosen something else, the vibration in the world with love would have been much bigger. And missing out on that, she said, that was what really hurt me during her NDE, during her life review. Now, that shows you that you have a free will. So we do have a free will. But apparently, there are some items in your life that you need to go through. And so it's difficult to say where does free will stop, or where is it there. And a friend of mine in the Netherlands, she had an NDE too, and she said sometimes it's strange that you can look into the future and see that things will play out in a specific way. So is it determined to be like that? She says it's different. It's like if you are in an airplane, for instance. Let me put it differently. If you are in Amsterdam, you cannot see Haarlem. I'm living in Amsterdam, as you know. And Haarlem is a place like 11 miles away from here. So if you are walking in Amsterdam, you cannot see Haarlem. If you're walking in Haarlem, you cannot see Amsterdam. But if you take a different point of view, like you're in an airplane, you can see both cities at the same time. Same, she says, with looking into the future. It is like you take a different point of view. You see someone struggle. Shall I go left or shall I go right? But you can also see at the same time what the choice is. So you know which direction is going to be, left or right. So I hope I made myself a little bit clear that this is the way you can also look at that things seem to be determined for the future, but it's still free will there.
It's really a hard thing to grasp. I mean, some of these concepts, and I think we need to remember that our minds can only handle so much. I mean, we are humans, that once we move beyond this life, we will have a much greater understanding. And I assume that's what you hear from people that you have talked to.
Yes, yeah. That's exactly what I meant to say. So if you are in that other realm, apparently you can see much more. There's a bigger overview of everything. You get the big picture. You get not only the big picture, you get everything. If we are here in our limited body, in our limited environment with only 3 dimensions and time, then we cannot see everything. And I think that's the difference. I do started to believe that there are more dimensions, and we are here just at a very limited level of surviving or living. It's limited. Everything is limited. On the other side, there is so much freedom. It's unlimited.
You mentioned that people say they can see the future. I found when I was at IANDS, a lot of people were talking about this shift that is supposedly coming up. Do you hear the same sorts of things from people?
Yes, there are many NDEs that do believe that there needs to be a shift, something needs to change, but it's maybe not necessarily the material world. It's like maybe it's that people, the general public, will move to become more spiritual. Like if you look back 500 years, in Europe, we were all believing in one faith. We were very much believers of whatever was written in the Bible. That has gone away. We are more secular now, but it is being replaced gradually by something else, that we look beyond scriptures like the Bible or any other religion, that there is something else, something that is more elevated. And it's interesting that there are NDEs that say the real thing, so what we will find on the other side, is much bigger than any one of the religions. And that is, I think, something more people will understand. Also, like in your country, there are still a lot of people that are very religious. not so much in my country and in Europe, but I think that will change, and I think it will be replaced by more spiritual oriented thinking. I think that's the shift. Do you think it would be different, something else more materialistic or so? I'm not sure.
You mentioned earlier changing the vibration, and I think, if we can do that with our choices, I think we also do that as we become more spiritual because of, listening to this kind of information.
Yes, and for this change, you don't need to have an NDE. That's the interesting thing. You don't, like I can see from my life that I changed. Maybe you can say that also from your life, apparently. So you don't need to have an NDE to change because of other people having had such an experience. Because you learn from that. There is this understanding that is also embedded in ourselves, that is opened by the experiences of others, because all the truth is already within us. Everything is within us. The unlimited love, the unconditional love, but also the knowledge, the feeling. I also believe that everyone can increase their intuition, their sensitivity to other people, feeling what they go through, and maybe even also feeling what is going to happen if you really go into yourself. I think we can go very far. Maybe that's also the shift that people see.
It's interesting too how you put it, because it really is more of remembering who we are
Yeah.
versus learning about
Yeah.
it.
That's typically what NDEs say. It's when they are on the other side, they suddenly remember who they are. And I like that word, just remember, because we are like that. We are the perfection already. We have the unconditional love. We just don't know it because it's buried under all this having to do, to go find food, to find money, to be limited and oppressed perhaps by whatever in our societies, that you cannot come to your best potential. But it's there, and it's possible. That's also what I understand. And asking the universe helps. They will help. The universe. So the I'm not talking about the universe. I'm talking about the source. Actually, the source uh, communicates very subtle. And when we are on our phone and going to the grocery stores and being in our car and do all kinds of stuff all the time, we don't allow that subtle communication to come in.
That is so true, and that's probably one of the problems we have with modern society is we don't give ourselves enough time just to connect. Bob, I have so enjoyed this conversation, and I have a lot more questions for you, but let's go ahead and take that into part 2.
Oh, wonderful. I'm looking forward to that.
I enjoyed that. It was really nice to hear the perspective of a near-death experience researcher, and we have a lot more great stuff in part 2.
She looked around and she saw this big presence, this powerful, really, she said it was so powerful, this something that was there. And she asked, and who might you be? And then this powerful something said to her, giving God or the source the possibility to experience life. So the source understands what it is to be in such an environment, to experience life through us, because we are all parts of the source.
I've heard that a lot as well. And one viewer reached out to me in the comments after we had discussed something like that on a podcast, one of our episodes. And she said, when has God experienced enough? When is there enough murder or torture or abuse? And I thought that was a really, really interesting question. Do you have any idea on that? I know that's a tough one. So I hope you'll come back for that. Plus, there's a lot more that we talk about. But right now, I would love to hear your thoughts on everything we discussed in part 1. So please leave that in the comments. And as I always say, if you prefer just to say you made it, that also is really helpful. If you want information on a guest anytime, always look in the description for that, any links they have, books, that kind of thing. You also, of course, can always find a link there to my playlist. And you can find links to, to part 1 or part 2, that sort of thing. So always check that out. Thank you, everybody. I so appreciate you being here today. I appreciate you every time you watch my show. So thank you so much. And I do hope I'll see you in part 2. Thanks for joining me on Beyond with Heather Tesh. Please add comments and questions you'd like future guests to answer. Also, if you liked what you heard, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe. That'll help keep this podcast going. You can also go to Beyond with Heather Tesh to look for more episodes.